Tell me when.
All right. Here we are. So we've got the recording going for anybody who's coming late, but we'll just let Phil Caporusso take it away. Jet Direct Mortgages.
Thank you, Mike. Well, Mike and Glenn, thank you so much. I always appreciate working with honest, hardworking agents and brokers who know the real estate business and care about their agents. And that's both of you guys. So I appreciate the invite and I appreciate the way you guys work. So how is everybody doing in this crazy real estate market? It's a bit nuts. Mike and I were just talking about that a little bit. So we're gonna cover two topics today: mortgage interest rates and how they affect the real estate market today, and then how to succeed in it. All right. There is so much data and information and even misinformation out there. And it's easy to get confused about the state of the real estate market. And very often confusion can lead to anxiety and fear about what's going to happen and being able to earn an income for ourselves, right? It's just confusion leads to anxiety, which can lead to inaction. Okay. So let's talk about the basics. Do people need a place to live? I did a brief Google search and there are, believe it or not, 10 different nomadic tribes throughout the world, which means they pick up their tent and move, but none of them are here in the United States. So people here in the United States need a permanent place to live. They don't have a tent, can't pick up and move. So that means real estate, which is real property, is important. So will people always in the US need a place to live? The answer is yes. Yeah. So based on this, houses will always be purchased and sold. Those are just facts. So you can and will succeed no matter what the real estate conditions are, especially at eXp Realty. I know the business model, it's a great business model, but ultimately it's up to you. You may not remember this, but there was a time when interest rates were over 18%. Yes, I remember it because I actually lived through it. Okay, I was very young at the time, but I remember interest rates 18%.
When was that? I don't want to interrupt your flow, but that's my dad has talked about that, like
1981, 82, right around there. Right. The end of the Jimmy Carter era, right before Ronald Reagan took over. Inflation, and then Paul Volcker was the Fed chairman at the time. Right. And just they jacked up. Inflation was crazy, so they jacked up rates like crazy. And of course, mortgage rates were 18%. And I've heard even higher than that, but let's use that as a number. So at 18%, were people still buying homes? Yes. You know why? They needed a place to live. Right. So I've heard some clients say this, and you may have heard the same thing. I'm going to wait until next year when interest rates go down. But the consensus amongst professionals is that rates probably will not go down based on what the Fed is saying. No one has a crystal ball, but we can look at probabilities, right? Will mortgage rates go down? You never know. But if I was a betting man, I would say probably not in the next 12 months. We're going to discuss this a bit more. One thing I tell my clients, and you can use this quote, and I encourage you to use it. Here's the quote. You are married to the house, not the interest rate. You can always refinance when rates go down, and eventually they will go down again. And I've done that with countless clients. I can't tell you how many clients that I helped purchase, when rates were 7, 8%, and then when rates went down to 4% or 3%, they refied. That's a beautiful thing. And that's what I could tell my clients, and that's what I encourage you to tell your clients. Also, go ahead.
It's funny. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Big, and I hear that so many times. But there was an agent that was down at EXPCon coming from Alabama. His name is Ricky Caruth, and he has this training called Zero to Diamond. And he mentioned that quote. And I don't know why, but I'm not saying it's something, I say it sometimes too. It depends to who you say it to. But why is it a negative quote to say? Why would you say it's a negative quote to say?
Why is it a negative quote? I don't think it's a negative quote. I think it's actually a positive quote because if people feel like the interest rates are high and all they know is numbers, right? People hear the headlines. Interest rates are 7%, the highest they've been in 20 years, which is true. People are used to the era of low interest rates, 2, 3, 4%. They're used to that. It's called recency bias. That means that we think that whatever happened recently always happens. That's not the case, right? So the way to put this in perspective for people is say, look, interest rates historically have been higher, right? And even though they may be higher now than they were in the past, you could buy the house, get into the payment. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but you can always refinance later.
Refinance, right?
It's the house that you want, right? As long as you can afford the payment. And again, I'm going to talk about that. That's actually what I was going to talk about next. So when people start talking about interest rates being high or prices being high, I always change the conversation to the monthly payment. If they can afford the monthly payment and are comfortable with the monthly payment, then the price really doesn't matter that much, right? And the monthly payment is always going to be affordable to them, because if it wasn't, the loan wouldn't get approved and it would not meet the Fannie Mae qualifications, right? And they wouldn't get a mortgage commitment, right? So the monthly payment is really, as an agent, and I do the same thing, focus on the monthly payment. Focus on the fact that they love the house and they can eventually refinance, right? Do you love the house? And we're going to talk about the emotional reasons why people want to buy real estate.
Do you think that the buyers are fine? They get it. They can buy, maybe they get the house and they can afford the monthly payment and they're
Right.
okay with this monthly payment. They can make it happen financially.
Right.
But do you think what's deterring them from going forward is that it's not going to appreciate now, it's going to actually depreciate? So now they're thinking they're going to lose equity even though they're paying for it. So I think that's what they're scared of more than they are the rate, though.
Okay. We're going to talk about that. It's actually part of the rest of the presentation, and we'll answer any questions. If I don't address it, I think I will, but if I don't, feel free to ask me again.
I just wanted to see the other perspective of coming in from that angle. Marry the house, not the rate. But then there's the other side, the other spectrum of it. I wanted to hear the approach coming in from that angle. Just wanted to hear if there was something that you might have heard, because
Sure.
some people.
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Phil. Sorry, just too deep into
I was going to say, ultimately, it really depends on your perspective, right? If someone, and I've said this to people, if you're looking to buy the house and sell it in a year, then yeah, it's not a good time to buy, probably, because they may go down. Again, nationally, probably yes. Locally, probably, maybe not, right? Maybe flatten out, maybe go down a couple percent, maybe 5%, but probably not that much. But that's in the next year or two. After that, historically, in this country, appreciation rates for real estate are between 1% and 5% on average. Obviously, in 2020 to 2021, those numbers were skewed. They were 15%, depending on where you were looking. And so now there's an adjustment. But over the long run, and this is what I would encourage, if an agent, if somebody says to me or even thinks about it, or you can even address it, say, look, in the short run, yeah, maybe in the next year, it may not be positive appreciation. But in the long run, it will be. Historically, in this country, it is positive appreciation between 1% and 5% on average for the last like 90 years, whatever the time frame is. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about that in a second. Here's another bit of encouraging news and positive news. 10% of all homes change hands every year. Think about that for a second. My former boss, guy who I worked for, who owned a bank, he also owned another company that supplied property data to title companies. So they saw the number of properties changing ownership every day, right? And you say, well, how does that happen? 10%? Yeah, on average, 10% of all homes turn over every year. Now, why is that? Life happens. People die. People lose their jobs, so they may have to move. People get new jobs and want to upgrade. They have more kids, needing to have bigger homes. People need to downsize when their kids move out. People age out and may need to go into assisted living and sell their house. And what about divorce and remarriage? Sadly, over 50% of all marriages end in divorce. What happens to those homes? I deal with that pretty regularly. And what about financial reasons? People retire, so they move to less expensive home or estate. And here's a new one. What about political reasons? Yes, people move for political reasons along with everything else that I mentioned. And there are others. Bottom line is life happens, right? So because life happens, that means real estate activity. The last bit of good news is that with the stock market not doing well, many investors are looking for alternatives. And rental real estate is great because rental income usually keeps pace with inflation. Anyone who currently is renting understands this. So if I was an agent, I would focus on real estate investors as well as end users, right? So again, the basics are people need somewhere to live and life happens. There will always be business for all of us. The only question is how much of it do you want to do and are willing to work for?
Right.
So some of you have heard some or read some of these news, let's say headlines about a market crash. Let's talk about that for a second. So what does the media say about, will there be a market crash like in 2007 to 2010? That was the financial crisis, let's call it the financial crash. So one of the great things about being in the business for 26 years, like I have, is you get to see a lot of different types of real estate markets. So having lived through that crash 2007 to 2010, I can tell you that this is different because the main reasons for that crash are not here today. Back then, we had 100% financing on no doc deals, no income, no asset, no job. I know, crazy, right? It sounds stupid, but investors and banks were offering 100% no income check loans with a 6% seller concession with a credit score as low as 600. Now think about how stupid that is. For whatever reason, it was being offered. We could go into the weeds about that, but there's no need to. But now, yes, we are currently offering no doc or low doc loans only for self-employed borrowers. And I do quite a bit of these loans, but they require larger down payments, usually a minimum of 15 to 20%, sometimes 25 and 30%, and they require higher credit scores. So it's much less likely that these properties will go into foreclosure and start another crash. And another contributing factor to that crash back then was that loan officers like myself and appraisers didn't need to be licensed. And many people in the mortgage and appraisal business did some really, I'll just say, bad things. That's really funny. So many people in the mortgage and appraisal business did some bad things, which artificially inflated prices, which led to the crash, honestly. Now, I'm not a fan of the government for many reasons, but sometimes rules and laws have to be put in place to protect people. And in 2010, a law passed called Dodd-Frank Act, which were put in place so that a real estate crash was less likely to happen. So now loan officers and appraisers have to be licensed, except for big banks and credit unions, where the loan officers do not have to be licensed. I know. Why is that? I have no idea. But the big banks, Chase, Wells, Bank of America, all those guys, and the credit unions have loan officers that do not have to be licensed. Also, licensing rules for appraisers were put in place. So much of the bad stuff, the illegal stuff that happened back then, that led to artificially inflated prices is gone. All right, so those two reasons means the probability of another crash like that are very, very low. Will there be adjustments to price? Yes, probably so, but not another market crash. All right, so that's something to keep in mind when you talk to your clients again, right? It's really, really, really unlikely that we're going to have another crash like that. Again, an adjustment, yes, but not a crash. So what's going on with interest rates in the real estate market? Now, it's important for you as the real estate agent to be educated, more educated than the clients you speak to. So let's talk briefly about interest rates and what makes them moves. So as most of you have seen or heard in the news, interest rates have gone up. Why? Because the government printed too much money during and after the pandemic, and that makes each dollar worth less. And when each dollar is worth less, it takes more dollars to buy the same item. Some of you guys may remember when a can of Coca-Cola was $1 or even 50 cents. Today, the average cost of a can of Coke is $1.50. It's the same can of Coke, but it costs more. That's inflation. And again, we don't want to get into the weeds on why that is, but the bottom line is the price of each item has gone up. So because there's more dollars in circulation. So after all that money printing, what happened next is that the central bank of the US, called the Federal Reserve, or the Fed as it's called, raises interest rates. It lends the overnight interest rate it lends to other banks. This is to reduce inflation by slowing down the economy. Think of the Fed raising interest rates like putting brakes on the engine of the US economy, and thereby reducing inflation. So the Fed in September just recently raised rates by 0.75% to a total of 3.25. That's the Fed funds overnight rate, with the expectation from other professional traders that the Fed funds rate will be about 4 to 4.5% by the end of the year, and maybe even slightly increase in 2023, and then probably decrease in the middle of 2023 towards the end of 2023. What the Fed increase is will how much the Fed increases rates will depend on inflation data such as the consumer price index. So that's something to keep an eye on. If you're like, what is moving the Fed? Look at the consumer price index. That's one of their favorite gauges of inflation. So the Fed raising overnight lending rates then affects mortgage interest rates. The mortgage rate has gone from about 3% in January of this year to around 7.25%, according to a Google search. If you do a Google search of New York mortgage rates, it's about 7.25% or even a little bit higher. This is the highest it's been since 2002. Now, mortgage interest rates could easily be around 7.5% to 8% by the end of the year, this year, or early next year. Excuse me. So higher mortgage rates means the buyer's borrowing power has been reduced by about 36% since the beginning of the year. So a client who could afford a $500K mortgage in January can now only afford a $320,000 mortgage. Since less people can afford the same house that they could in January, it's reasonable to expect that there is less demand. And then usually the seller has to accept less money to sell their house, since there are less people who can make an offer and bid up the price of that house. So the price, of course, will adjust downward. You may see it with the number of people coming to open houses, right? You may have read this headline: the Fed wants to kill the housing market. Is this true? No. The Fed wants to kill the unsustainable upward price appreciation by reducing the demand, which will then reduce and lower inflation. That's their goal, to lower inflation back down to about 2% per annum. So looking forward, according to many economists, the national real estate market may suffer with lower prices. but the local real estate market, as Mike and I were talking about briefly, is going to return to a more normal market with smaller market yearly increases, or even being flat for a while, maybe a slight decrease. We're talking about the local metropolitan area. As you know, real estate is a local market. Each city, each region is different. Remember that the national real estate market that you sometimes hear about in the media is different than the local metropolitan market due to supply and demand. There is much less supply of houses locally compared to other parts of the country, right? In a recent article I read, some of areas of the country are experiencing 24% of contracts being canceled. But here in the metro New York area, it's only about 7%. All right, so look at it locally. Yeah, you can hear all these stuff about national, but your market is local. So educate your sellers, show them the statistics on what is happening. Be their source of information, right? That is the value that you add to your clients, your education, your expertise, your hard work, right? So to me, this change in the market is a great thing. Why? Because it is more of a balanced market with buyers and sellers. Focusing on listings was a moneymaker the past few years, and it will continue to be. But now buyers are more important, right? A good qualified buyer who's ready, willing, and able definitely will get you some closings, no question about it. So with this change in the market, it scares some people, right? And some agents will quit. Why? Because it takes more effort. And some will succeed immensely. Why? Because there's less competition. So which will you be? This is totally up to you. There will be many agents that will quit, but it doesn't have to be you. You can succeed with the right information and the right attitude. So when is this interest rate market going to change, right? No one has a crystal ball, but everything I am reading says that the Fed will stop increasing rates around the first quarter of 2023, assuming inflation starts easing up, which people think it will. Recently, the CPI, Consumer Price Index, came in at 8.2%, which was higher than expected. So when that happens, rates will be a little bit higher, and they have gone up. Over the past month, I can tell you rates have gone up at least 1%, maybe to 1.5%. Okay. So one of the main issues facing buyers is uncertainty. And since people hate uncertainty, many buyers may be thinking about holding off. Right now, it may seem like buyers are like a deer caught in the headlights and they just freeze. But you and I have to educate them to show them it is still a good time to buy. Now, how are you going to do that? How are you going to do more business? Why do buyers even want to buy a house with these higher interest rates? Here are the reasons that you need to remind your buyers. And I sent you guys, I don't know if you got a chance to put it up there, Mike, but I sent everybody a handout.
I can do
And
a screen share if you want, if that's helpful at this point.
yeah, I mean,
Everybody's
it's
got it,
you can email it to everyone as well if you
Yep.
want to. That way
Yeah,
they
I
have
did
it.
that.
But if you want to do a screen share right now, that's great. So here are the reasons, and this is what you have to remind people. Now, what you just did, give me 1 second, bro. You
No
just
problem.
got my, here it is. Now I'm back. Okay. So here are the reasons. Here are the reasons. Here are the reasons why people still want to own a house and why they want to still buy a house, right? Sellers, we know their reasons. They want to get on with life. They want to make, they want to move on, to Florida. They want to move on to the smaller house, bigger house, whatever their reason is for wanting to move, right? So what are the reasons why people want to still buy? Well, there's emotional reasons, right? And that should be on your screen. Well, because people want the security of their own home, physical security. Not to get off on a tangent about politics, but these bail reform laws have made the city and even parts of New York less safe, especially in apartment buildings. So people want their own safe space for them and their family and their kids, right? How about number 2, making memories, having fun, right? Parties, celebration, gatherings. People want to have fun. They want to enjoy life. Much harder to do in an apartment or renting than it is in your own space, in your own house with a backyard and a nice house where you can just do stuff with. I mean, I have memories of growing up in the Bronx and we'd go to my grandmother's house. Those are memories, right? You don't forget those things. Some of you guys probably have those same memories of growing up. Can't do that in an apartment, really. You can do that in a house. So making memories is a big one. How about freedom? Freedom to do what the person wants to do versus what the landlord tells them to do. I had a conversation with a real estate agent, again, in the Bronx where I do some business. And this agent was telling me that her landlord was giving her such a hard time. It basically was pushing her to get out because she didn't have the freedom to do what she wanted to do, to live the way she wanted to live. That's what renting will do. And that's what owning a house will do. So what about, yes. Did someone want to say something?
Forget it. Go ahead, Phil. I'm sorry.
Okay. What about lifestyle? right? We talked about this. People want the lifestyle of owning a house, putting in the pool in the backyard. So in the summertime, you can invite your family over and have a great barbecue in the pool, right? And just have fun with your family. And it's a lifestyle, right? Your kids want to play sports. Can't do that really in an apartment, right? Or in a small place wherever you're renting, right? But you can do that. You can play football in the backyard. You can play. I practice lacrosse in the backyard with my kids, right? They love lacrosse. Whatever it is, having people over, having a barbecue, lifestyle. So those are four, and I'm just naming four of them, emotional reasons. And you as an agent, you need to find out what is the emotional reason why people want to buy a house still. And you
Yeah.
want to remind your clients of why they want to buy a house. That if you keep pinging them with emotional reasons. Okay.
So you're essentially saying you're giving them a really, really serious pitch now. You're turning their wants into actual essential needs now, you're saying. And it's you really got to zero in and say it's still a good time. It's not the market's not crashing. These wants should be your essential needs. And that's what you're zeroing in on. It's someone I heard that from another, I think it was an actual banker or somebody said, it's really up to these real estate agents as a whole to control this market. And now they can really, really provide solutions, like you just said. And it's like really getting deep into the questions that you're going to ask these guys.
Yeah. A really good real estate agent um, will always zero in on the client's emotional needs. That is ultimately what's driving them, right? So remember, people have two sides of the brain, right? They got the emotional side and they got the rational side. So I just gave you the emotional side. And as an agent, you need to zero in on that. And you need to write that down. And you need to remind the client why they want to buy a house. Here's the financial reasons. Because real estate is one of the best long-term investments that anybody can make. And if you look at the chart of the handout that I gave you, it shows you that renting versus owning a house, there is no comparison between the two of who has more wealth. No question about it. For the average person, their home is their largest source of wealth. No question about it. And so housing appreciation, long-term, usually, as I just mentioned a little while ago, long-term housing appreciation is between 1% and 5% per year, nationally speaking. Some places more, some places less. But there's always appreciation, right? That's number one. Number two, it provides housing payment security. So once you have a mortgage, your payment is basically fixed. Okay. Yeah, your taxes may go up a little, but that's a small piece of the puzzle, right? Whereas when you rent, the landlord can come to you tomorrow and say, hey, by the way, I'm raising your rent $200. I had this one client I was talking to. She said her client raised her tenant raised her rent by like $300 to $400 a month. I mean, that's a lot of money. And can they do it? Of course, it's their house, right? But when you own a house, your monthly housing payment is fixed. It's not changing, right? That's number two. What about number three? Equity buildup. What does that mean? Well, that means when you're making the mortgage payment, the amount that you owe on the mortgage goes down. If you stay in the house over 30 years, you're going to pay that mortgage off to zero, right? So you're paying that mortgage off. You're building equity in that house. As the saying goes, you're always paying a mortgage. It's either yours or your landlord's.
So
Go
to
ahead.
make this work for this buyer, any buyer that wants to actually, okay, you're right on all these points, they're gonna want to see something giving on their end too. And what they want on their end is the lower price. Do you say that we come in there and start lowballing?
You guys know the actual market, the real estate market better than I do. I don't think that's would apply yet. It depends on the property, right? I mean, one of the things I would always say is look at how long a property's been on the market,
Mhm.
right? If it's been on the market a while, then maybe you could come in with a low ball offer,
Right. I'm
5,
gonna
10% below ask. If the property is well priced, and you guys know this better than anybody, maybe it's still a good deal at that number. I mean, I was talking to a client just today she's buying it up in Westchester County, and uh, she went to a house. It was priced at 355. It wasn't Westchester. I'm sorry. It was Orange County, a little bit further up. So the price was 355. She came in with an offer of 420, and it's still, she didn't get it because it went above what she put on, what her offer was. So it depends on the house. It depends on the local market. You know, obviously you guys know that better than I do, but I would say that look at and see how long the property's been on the market first. That's step number one.
Mhm, mhm.
That's step number one. All right. Show them, and then the last thing about the financial reasons, right, is owning a house provides tax deductions, income tax
Yeah, yeah.
deductions, which result in larger refunds when they file their taxes April 14th. Those are 4 financial reasons. I always give those reasons why it's better to own than rent. Show that well chart that I gave to you to your buyers. Go through these 4 different reasons. Really important.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
I
Go
want to
ahead.
I want to play this. It's kind of correlated a little bit to what we're saying here to the buyers. Mike, did you see that little link I sent you?
From this afternoon, you mean?
Just yeah.
Yep.
We are going to submit offers today that are probably going to.
There you go.
What?
Can't really hear it.
Yeah, I can't hear it, Glenn.
The first
Just
thing I would
summarize.
do is submit your attorney information with the offer. That shows that you've already hired, paid for, and retained a lawyer, so should they accept, you're ready to proceed pretty swiftly. It also shows seriousness because you've put money forward for the deal. Secondly, I would submit your offer with all of the comps and numbers provided. So percent that the market is down, what's recently sold in the building, and the neighborhood that justifies your low offer. And my third tip for submitting a low offer is to offer to sign the contract within 48 hours. A deal is actually not done when it's closed. It's done when the contract is signed. And so that is really all a seller cares about. Yes, we want to close ASAP, but we want to sign contract ASAP. I guarantee you'll get a counter if you do all of these.
That's good advice. That's really good.
She's basically saying that make the offer, make the lowball offer, have the right pre-approval in place, and put the attorney information, and that you're ready to sign contracts as soon as possible.
And show the reason for the lowball offer, right? Other comps that have sold.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's hard to find right now.
Yeah. Well, if you get a rational seller who's reviewing all that, that should work. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really adjust for the irrationality, right? If the numbers work, they work for both sides. If they're based on, sound past sale comps or current sale comps, not every seller will listen, or when they do listen, they may hear something totally different. So that's it. But we always have to deal with that X factor.
Right.
You just have to
Well,
make a bunch of offers.
the good thing now is that at least the listing agents are aware that the market is shifting and has shifted.
Yeah.
So they may realize, you know what, and hopefully relate to the seller. Hey, the market is different. This may be a great offer, especially if it's like first to second or third week. After that, we know that the amount of offers or the amount of people looking at that house will slow down
Right.
and decrease. And if a house has been on the market for 3-4 weeks, that's when you could go in with a great, with a lower offer. That's what I would say. But go in with loaded with your ammunition, right?
Yep.
Okay, almost done. And then if you guys want, we can have a brief Q&A. So when you meet with or speak to your buyers, Ask them the questions and find out their real emotional reasons for wanting to buy a house. And then when they may get discouraged, remind them, these are the reasons why you wanted to buy a house, Mr. Buyer. Has anything changed? Probably not. Some phrases to use when speaking to clients. And again, we talked about this before. You are married to the house, not the interest rate. Buy now and you can refinance later, right? So what is an agent to do to be successful? Go back to the basics, right? Remember the basics. People need a place to live and want to own a house, right? Real estate activity will always continue because why? Life happens and people need to buy and need to sell, right? Investors, they want a good, stable return on their investments. So they want rental real estate, right? That's an area I would also focus on. Again, but keep in mind, investors are not going to pay full retail, right? They're going to try and get a deal. So just keep that in mind, right? So here are some practical tasks, some practical things to do to keep your pipeline full. Number one, reconnect with your sphere of influence. Your friends, your family, your past acquaintances, professionals, divorce attorneys, estate attorneys, real estate attorneys, past clients, and ask the question, who do you know that wants or needs to buy or sell real estate? It's a very simple question. And you're probably going to get some good responses, right? It's about marketing, putting yourself out there. Okay. Number two, make some new connections by handing out your business card to whom? Well, everyone you meet, right? Everyone needs to live somewhere and is probably interested in real estate. Networking events with other professionals are also important. Okay. Face-to-face relationships. Here's a tip for especially some of the newer, I won't say newer, some of the younger people, millennials who maybe are used to social media more than anything. Face-to-face relationships are vital. Learn this skill, not just through social media. Many people hide behind a screen or a phone. It's too easy to ignore people you have never met physically, right? That's just facts. You know, somebody that you've met physically, you have more regard for them because they're not just somebody on the other side of a screen. You met them, you talked to them, right? So again, especially for the say younger people, millennials, let's say, or even whatever the one is after that. I forget the term. Talk to people, meet
Gen
them
Z.
physically. What is it?
Gen Z.
Gen Z. Thank you. And then there's one after that. I forget what it is.
I don't even know what it is. I think my kids are the ones after that, but
Right. My kids too, probably.
TBD. I guess. Yeah.
But obviously, people, technology has changed the way people interact, right? So, but yet people are still people. That is never going to change, hasn't changed for thousands and thousands of years. Face-to-face relationships are vital. Okay. Learn the art of people skills. Here's one of those skills that many people don't really know. Ask open-ended questions. Excuse me. Do not ask yes or no questions. Ask open-ended questions like, how do you like this house? What is it that you're looking for? Let them talk. People want to talk about the most important person to themselves, which is who? It's them.
Mhm.
Give them an opportunity to talk about themselves. This is what people really ultimately want. So you ask open-ended questions. You don't ask yes or no questions. You want to develop a dialogue. A dialogue turns into a conversation, which turns into a relationship, which turns into a lifelong client. It's a basic skill, but a lot of people don't understand it, right? I read this book a long time ago. It's probably, the book itself is probably 90 years old. It said, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Some of you may have read this book. It's an old book, but guess what? It still pertains because people haven't changed in 100 years. People are still interested in themselves. So all you do is ask questions, open-ended questions about them, and you will get them talking. And that's ultimately what you want, right? a relationship. Okay, so I actually do an entire training session on people skills and how to connect with people, which is, I think, a lost or dying skill, but still vital. Don't forget, we're in the people business. Okay, so what else besides the thing we just talked about, making new connections, reconnecting with your sphere of influence, something old school. I don't know if door knocking is prohibited in New York. I know in some places it's not. In New York, it may still be, but there's something called a door hanger. A door hanger is just it's just basically something. It's a piece of it's a flyer basically on a small cardboard thing that you can hang on a door. We can help you with this. We actually provide those for you at no cost. It's a co-branded door hanger with your information on one end, on one side, our information on the other side. If you want that, email me. I'd be happy to, or text me or call me. I'd be happy to get that done for you. There's still a lot of people who still like those. Okay. Here's another old school trick. It's called calling expired listings, calling FSBOs, for sale by owner, right? That sounds like old school, but it still works. It still works. Okay. Again, I know there's some restrictions if they're on the do not call list. I get that, but this is another venue, another avenue for you to go down. Okay. How about some old school techniques? How about hosting community fairs? There's fairs going on everywhere, right? Oktoberfest, whatever it is, school PTA meetings. There's so much stuff that you can connect to in your community, right? All right. How about this? Calling lists of people who came to your open houses. Right? Even if it was a couple of months ago, call them. You may connect with some people who are still looking, who haven't found something and are still looking, right? Of course, there's always the new school lead generation systems, social media, all kinds of lead gen systems, and you maybe use some of those. Okay, so remember, closing real estate transactions is always about generating enough leads, buyer and seller leads, and then converting them. I can help you convert more of those buyer leads into actual closings because we as a company have a wide variety of different mortgage programs. So just about anybody can get a mortgage approval. Not everybody, just about anybody with decent credit and income, or even if they're not, they don't have income, they have, if they're self-employed, they have cash flow in their bank statements, or they can get a profit and loss statement from their accountant. Those are some different things that we can do. Okay. And keep in mind, that I've been in the business a long time. I don't like to waste time, your time, my time. I spend the time ahead of time. Like if you send me a client, I spend the time to make sure the pre-approval works. And I will be honest with you and with them and keep you up, of course, updated that every deal, so that every deal works, right? Remember, your lead, your client is my client. We're a team. And ultimately, we want to get to the closing table. So feel free to call me with any questions, scenarios, even if it's not my deal. I'm of the mindset that Zig Ziglar says, if you help enough people get what they want, you will be assured of getting what you want. So that's my philosophy. So if I can help you in any way, shape, manner, or form, call me, text me. Let's have a conversation. All right, I'm done. Q&A. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to chat with anybody. If not, we can wrap it up.
Glenn, did you have any that we paused for the end? Or you got them in? You're on mute.
You're on mute, bro.
Yeah, sorry I interrupted you earlier.
That's okay.
You're excited about
I
your
didn't realize
question.
you're going through your yeah, it's challenging, and I want to really know how to tackle these challenges because I feel like it's time to be in front of these people, and so you want to know what to say and how to go into it. Everyone's different a little bit, but if you kind of go with that direction somehow and kind of convey that message to them, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's changing their mind and changing their mindset now a little bit.
Right.
Trying to.
So like we said, and Mike was talking about this at the very beginning, the funnel, if we want to call it, from leads to closing, you need more people in the funnel, right? It's just, that's the way it is right now, right? It used to be maybe 10 people, you get one closing. Now it's maybe 20 people. So it requires more work. But here's the great thing is that I think this market is going to weed out a lot of people, a lot of agents who really, I don't know how many agents there are in New York, but it's got to be tens of thousands.
I think we're close to 30,000 just on the Long Island board.
Oh my
Just
goodness.
Queens, Nassau, Suffolk. I think we were approaching 30,000 because during the pandemic, my thought during the pandemic was we're going to shed a lot of headcount. A lot of agents are going to say, how am I supposed to sell real estate right now? But no, actually, the more flexibility that came into their workday, the more time they had for something.
Right.
A lot of part-timers out there that got added. But if you're not doing deals, every September, I forget what the stat is. Every brokerage has attrition when the dues come in.
Yeah.
You could be in business. The beautiful thing about the real estate business is it's super leveraged. I mean, you could look up owners. You can, not get into where it's legal or not, but I mean, if you can walk around and talk to people and do business, that's zero cost to you for your lead. You just have to put literally the footwork in. But when those dues come around, it's like $700 or so. If you're not doing any business, that suddenly becomes a big number in your head. If you're doing a lot of business, it's nothing. You don't even think twice about paying it. The return on it is so much greater. But yeah, I think now you're right. We're finally going to see it's our biggest competition, and I'm not making this stuff up. This is a lot that I get from our larger EXP group. Our biggest competition the last couple of years have been like the family members or the part-timers or the people that just do a couple deals a year, because it was kind of easy. You list with someone who you say, all right, I like this person. I know they're not that experienced and they look like geniuses. As long as it's not badly overpriced.
Right.
Prior to March or April of this year, you could have it gone in a week. You look like a genius. A lot of I saw so many social media posts where it's like gone in 6 days. We need more inventory. It's like that's not something to brag about in the market that we were in.
Right
now, if you shrink that to just the big players, I'll compete with the big players all year long. It's going to be better than like expanding the pool, because it's really hard. You walk into a listing and you have all the credentials in the world. Uncle Joe might get the listing just because he'll be heartbroken if he doesn't. How do you compete with that? You could say all the right things and know all the right things. Hands down, you're the better choice. You don't always get the listing. Sometimes you pick it up and if it expires, but now you're going to have that opportunity to have people question, do I want to give it to Uncle Joe? Do I trust that Uncle Joe is going to, I could lose tens of thousands of dollars if I don't have an expert to navigate these waters. So this is where like a dedicated agent can really pick up market share. Big time.
Yeah, real estate has got a low barrier to get in. So like you said, during the pandemic, people had so much time, they were working remotely, whatever it was, and they were able to get into business, and as long as you could pass the test. Now it's going to be harder to make money, right? And like you said, when dues come up every year, is it worth $700? Well, I mean, if you do a couple of deals a year, yeah, maybe, but if you don't, then what are you going to do, right? So I think, like you said, the professionals, the full-timers, the guys who really know what they're doing are going to pick up more of that market share that they didn't have before. So it's it's obviously to your credit, but you guys still have to go out there and hustle. And just like us, we have to be on our game constantly, just be on your game, know what you're talking about, know what's going on with the market, know what's going on with interest rate, get those questions all the time, because there's just too much fluff out there. Too many people just don't know what they're doing, and they will just tell people whatever the tickle areas, so to speak, right? But we got to get in there and tell them the truth. So that's what's going on. But you guys have a lot, a great opportunity at this point. I really believe that. You really do.
I agree.
As long as everybody's willing to work hard.
Yep.
Right? At the end of the day, that's what matters.
So I think the only other thing I had in my mind that we'll try to keep it short, because I don't want to go like past an hour. Refis we didn't talk about, and agents don't really get involved in this, but we're kind of real estate advisors to our clients, and sometimes it still can make sense for a client to refi, especially if they really are not in a position to sell or buy right now for whatever reason. like what's the profile of someone who can actually refinance in an environment like this? And I mean, my thought is if you have a ton of equity, if you've owned your house 10 years or more, ton of equity, you might have a 15-year that you can convert into. An adjustable rate might make sense. Maybe a HELOC that is you don't even have to have the money out with interest accruing if you don't need it. I mean, if you can confirm or not confirm, I don't want to lead you here, and give us some extra thoughts. That's probably a good one to close on.
Okay. Good question. The great thing about it is that clients have, and as you mentioned, Mike, a ton of equity in their homes. So right there, if someone, and then it comes down to the motivation, right? What are they looking to do? If they need, like I just talked to someone today, right? They own a house that's worth maybe 750, 800. They have a $250,000 mortgage. They want to invest. And that's where I think is an untapped market, because people can tap into their equity. They
Yep.
want to invest. They understand. I think at this point, a lot of people, most people, I would even say, understand the benefit of investing, especially when you're talking about like not just flipping, but holding rental real estate, right? So they say, look, I've got this equity. I've got 400K, 500K. I can tap into some of it, use it to buy something cash, or use it as a down payment on something else, right? So that to me is a home run. Like, why would you not want to do that? Like we talked about, rental real estate to me is, I won't say no brainer, but if you can buy something and the numbers make sense, meaning that the cash flow is good compared to the monthly payment, and you're getting a good return, even if you have a mortgage on it, and if you have a mortgage, you can pay down that mortgage, and say in 10 years from now, if you do it the right way, 10 years from now, that house will be free and clear. Now you have a ton of equity in that house, and you got cash flow. It's a pension. That's what a lot of people do, right? That's one of the things that I'm doing is, it's a pension. Why not do that? And how do you do that? Well, by tapping into the equity in your house, right? Because that equity in your house, if you think about it and you talk to people about it, that equity in your house is not doing anything for you, right? It's not increasing your value of your house. The value of your house has nothing to do with whether you have a mortgage or not, right? Two equal properties next to each other. One's got a mortgage of 100%. The other one's got zero mortgage. They're both going to appreciate at the same rate. Got nothing to do with the financing that's on there, right?
Oh.
So having a mortgage does not change the appreciation rate. All it does is allow you to tap in to that trapped equity and use it to buy another investment property,
You-
invest.
Do you see people tapping into their equity and buying properties 100%?
What do you mean 100%?
If they borrow 150, they're spending the whole, that's the whole cost of the house. 150.
Well, it depends on obviously where you're buying, right? There are parts of the country where you can still buy a decent piece of property for 150, 200,000. And as long as, some of the properties I've invested in are in a nice part of Florida
Yeah.
that you can, get a nice return on. I mean, at the end of the
But
day, that's what matters.
You don't have to put nothing, all the funds are coming out the line of credit. So the cash flow from that property have to cover the line of credit monthly obligations
Or you can,
and the costs, right?
right. Or you can buy something. If you, let's say let's say you pull out $100,000. That's all you can pull out, and you want to buy a $200,000 property. Well, you can finance the other $100,000, and
No,
whatever rent you're getting, you can pay down the mortgage. Was that your question?
yeah, well, I'm just saying that they use the the whole equity. They don't have 50,000 in their pocket. They just take all the money and they put all that into the investment and hope that covers the line of credit monthlies and the carrying cost for the property itself as well. Do you see that?
I would not recommend that you would take I wouldn't. Well, first of all, you can't get 100% equity cash out on your property, right? The most you're going to get is like 75%, 80% at the most. So you're not going to strip out all the equity of your house, right? You're just not, right?
No.
You can get financing at up to 75%, maybe 80. Okay.
Right.
And that money, whatever it is, you can then use as down payment for a house for an investment property, or you can use that down payment use as down payment and get a mortgage on a bigger piece of property. Again, it all comes down to what is the cost of capital and what is your return on that investment, right?
But that's what I'm getting at. That's what
Yeah.
I'm getting at. Okay.
Ultimately, it's your cost of capital, right? And what is it returning for you? You know, your return on investment. That's the bottom line parameter, regardless of what investment you're making. You know, I'm putting in this much money. It's costing me this much. My return is this much. I'm getting the difference. Now, again, you keep in mind that when you buy an investment property, there's two areas of your return, right? One of it is your cash flow, your monthly cash flow, and the other is the long-term appreciation, right? So if you plan on holding this property long-term and you buy it for 100K, let's just say, and 10 years from now it's worth 200K, hey, that's a nice investment, right? You just made 100K in 10 years, 10% per year. That's not bad at all. Plus whatever cash flow you made, right? And then it gets down to, and I do a whole seminar on investing in rental properties, and then it comes down to where are you buying? What are the tax laws? What are the rental laws, right? What is the demographics of the property? You know, what is your who's managing the property? There's so many things that go into it, but it can be done, and
Okay.
I've done some, and I've know plenty of people who've done that, even if it's not in your backyard, right? I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying in New York just because the rent laws suck. I can't even say it any other way, right? So if you own a property in New York, and I do own one, you know, if you get a crappy tenant or a tenant who wants to take advantage, what are you going to do? You're going to be in court for what? I don't know, Mike. What does an eviction take these days?
I mean, I would budget for a year.
And during that year, you're not getting any cash flow, and your house is probably getting trashed.
Yep.
And yet you still have the outflow. So the rent laws to me are like rule number one. That and crime, right? Those are the two. Rent laws, crime, demographics. Are you investing in a city, in an area where there's lots of people moving in, like Florida or Texas or places like that? And are there businesses and jobs and the economy growing? If so, then you're going to have cash flow because those people need a place to live, right? I'm not talking about investing in tourist places. You know, the Keys may be a great place to have the Florida Keys may be a great place to have a place. Is tourism always going to be great? I don't know. Maybe. I wouldn't bank on it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas are people going to still need a place to live if they got a job there, right? Yeah. Yeah. And again, I invest in specific locations, but again, the rent law is number one, the demographics, and crime. Those are the three most important. And then obviously at that point, then you look at cash flow. What is the cash flow on the property that you're looking at? I don't know if that answers your question or Glenn's question.
No. I just wanted to see, you know, if people are actually doing taking land.
I'm talking, believe it or not, I've got people who have mortgages at 3-4%, and they're going to cash out, and the new rate is going to be 7%. They're still doing it. Why? Because whatever monies they're going to get is going to be used, and it's going to give them a greater return. Right? Or there may be other reasons, like one guy's going to cash out because his brother, he's in with his brother, and his brother wants to buy his own property. You know, there's so many different reasons, and the reasons are varied based on the people themselves and what their situation is. So we got to ask those questions.
This has been really great, Phil. Let's, we'll circulate this if there are any other questions. So Phil, why don't you just give everybody quickly best way to get in touch with you, and it'll be circulated also with the video.
Of course. You can always call me directly. That's probably the best way to do it. My cell, 516-458-4497. It's on the handout that I handed out to you guys. Any questions? Look forward to talking to you guys.
Sounds good. Thank you so
Thanks,
much, Phil. And
all right, guys.
Another one of these again soon.
Yes, been a pleasure, guys. Have a great one.
All right,
Bye, Fallon.
Bye.